My friends, here we go. We're going to be talking about the art of ignoring it, how to selectively look the other way in order to help kids thrive. And my special guest tonight is Dr. Katherine Pearlman. And she has a book of a very similar title. Her book is called Ignoring It, How Selectively Looking the Other Way Can Decrease Behavioral Problems and Increase Parenting Satisfaction. I like that. I need a little bit more parenting satisfaction. So let me introduce all of you to Dr. Katherine Pearlman. I call you Katherine, Dr. Pearlman. Thank you. Thank you. Can you just give everybody the rundown on not only your book, but also your background? Because you do home visits like me, and you work with kids in a variety of ages, 2 to 18. But you're really working with the entire family. Can you tell us a little bit about that and a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and maybe about 10 years ago, I started a practice called the Family Coach, where I make home visits to help people with all kinds of parenting issues. And I have found, probably as you have, that I can see the dynamics in the home so much better than I can see in an office visit. And I feel like parents really enjoy having somebody on their home base. So I make home visits and I help with all kinds of parenting issues. Some is feeding issues, but also sleep issues, toddlers with tantrums, teenager issues, discipline, the whole spectrum. And really my goal is to help people enjoy their parenting time more. And after so many years of work in the field, I found I was always telling parents one piece of advice, which was ignore it. And it applied to so many scenarios, which is why I think it kind of resonated with you for feeding, but it also applies to a lot of behavioral issues as well. And so then I ended up putting all of the work I had done in homes into this one book. So it's kind of like me coming to a visit and going through the process, but using Ignore It as a way to help a whole variety of behavioral and parenting issues.
I love that. And I know that everyone can get your book at a variety of bookstores, online, Amazon, etc. But just to make sure that I have this correctly, because I'm going to type it in right now for everyone. Your website is?
thefamilycoach.com.
That's easy.
Yeah.
I'm going to just put that in here right now for everybody. And also, I wanted to mention to everybody listening that Dr. Pearlman's going to be answering your questions as soon as we get done chatting here. So go ahead and type your questions in now, and I'll go scroll through in a little bit and put them up on the screen. Alrighty, so why ignore?
So it really goes to a very basic principle, which is any behavior that has a reward will be repeated. And think about it logically. If something feels good, if we get something out of something, we're going to be more likely to do it again. And if there's no reward, we might say, there's probably a better way to do this. And so I think what's happening is that parents are reinforcing all the wrong behaviors. They're kind of getting involved with the squeaky wheel. So kids are whining, complaining, tantruming for what it is that they want. And then parents either give in because this is an exhausting job and we don't always have the strength to keep up with the no, or we negotiate, make a compromise, or we just give a lot of attention. And that reinforces the behavior. So what I try and teach people to do is to recognize these certain behaviors and then ignore them, wait for them to go away, and then immediately re-engage. So it sounds like I'm recommending to ignore children. I'm absolutely not. You should always be listening. But when you say, no, you may not have a cookie, or no, you may not have something else to eat, or no, you may not watch more TV, and then the tantruming starts, you can ignore. Wait till it goes away. As soon as it's quiet, you go and re-engage. So you're really listening so that you can engage. And what happens is kids realize there's no point in this tantrum if that cookie never comes. Like they're very quick about this. And there's no point in whining about eating my carrots. They're not going to get taken off my plate. So I might as well not even bother. So parents do this, kids learn quickly, and then they say, okay, how else can I get the positive attention? And at the same time, parents should really be finding the good stuff and giving attention to that. And then kids will say, I should be good more often. I should sit quietly at the table more often. I should say nice things to my sibling more often because I get a lot of attention for it.
Yeah. I always say attention is your child's paycheck.
Yeah, that's so good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that this is more me thinking like a speech language pathologist, but I also always want to remember that if I treat whining and tantrums like a foreign language that I just don't understand, it won't work for the child.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try really hard from the very beginning not to let those behaviors work for a child, and then they don't escalate. But more often I'll go to a family's home and the parents are so frustrated because things really have escalated because they've accidentally been reinforcing that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we do go through 2 or 3 days of pretty rough days as we're just ignoring that behavior and waiting very carefully to respond to the desired behavior and start to shape things into a more pleasant and a more meaningful, honestly, relationship. So I really like what you say about attention.
I was just going to add one thing, that it's what's really interesting is that sometimes, like when you're doing the ignoring, like you were mentioning, it takes 2 to 3 days and things might get worse and parents get very frustrated and sometimes they give up. For me, that's a sign it's actually working. The child is getting the message that your usual tantruming isn't working anymore and they're frustrated and angry. That means they get it. And right after frustrating and angry comes the change in behavior.
Always. It's the extinction burst, right? In applied behavioral analysis. Yeah. And I always want to warn the parents about the extinction burst because things will start to get a little better sometimes. And then I said, yeah, but just wait. They're going to give it that one last college try. And I just want to warn you, you quietly almost celebrate it because that means it's really about to go away.
Yeah.
But if you give in to that bigger, badder explosion of emotion, unfortunately, we almost have to go back to square one. So whatever you do, try your very best to ignore it. And it helps, of course, to have everyone in the household on the same page and make sure that we're responding to those desired behaviors and not paying much attention, if any at all, to the undesired. But the undesired ones are loud and furious sometimes. So when, just to kind of piggyback on that a little bit more, when things do get better, when you start the process with the family and they start to see that things are getting better, what's the average period of time for that? Or does it depend on the behavior and how long it's been going on?
So I would say the average really is 2 to 3 days, but 100% it does matter how long it's been going on and how intermittently they've been reinforcing. Mm-hmm. So if it's almost worse if parents give in sometimes and sometimes don't give in, because then the kid doesn't really know, should they just try harder? Should they just try longer? So those kids take a little bit longer to see, okay, my parents mean business. No means no. I'm not getting something else. I'm not getting a negotiation. So they eventually give up. But those kids that have had it for a long time or have had it intermittently on and off, that takes a little bit longer.
I really see that with kids right about age 4 when they have that big burst in language skills. They become like little pint-sized attorneys. They're so good at pulling us into their debate, whether they have to have more ketchup on their plate. And there's plenty of ketchup on their plate, but they just want to argue with you about the amount of ketchup. And it's so hard as a parent because they're just charming, to be honest with you. And it's just so easy to engage with them, not realizing, wait a second, we're having this major discussion on whether or not we need more ketchup, when really it's kind of a moot point, but they just pull you in. Do you find that that there's a certain age that this strategy works better for, or is it pretty much across the board?
It is really across the board from 2 straight through high school, even college. My kids know once I've said no and my back is, I'm done. I turn my back, it's over. Like once the ignoring begins, there's literally nothing more that's coming. And it works for teenagers as much as it does for toddlers. And they're actually very similar, which is kind of funny. They, respond very similarly. So it is really for all ages. And so parents should, if they learn it early, it's something that they can use straight through.
Yeah, definitely. I am going to throw kind of a curveball at you here because this isn't something you and I have chatted about before, but you got me thinking about a particular little one I'm working with. And one of the things that I've been working with this family about is that, later on after the behavior, when there's a desired behavior, we're going to give the child some attention, but it may not be, yay, good job behaving well. It's not like that. It's not that obvious. It's just some subtle attention. But do you ever find that maybe later on in the day, maybe when you're curled up and reading a book to the kid, just to whisper in their ear and say, I was really proud of you, how you handled that today. You were so kind to your brother. Do you ever recommend to parents that, even an hour or two later, they bring it up as another way to reinforce that behavior? Or what advice would you have around that?
So for the younger of the kids, they really need a very immediate attention and reinforcement. 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, a little bit later, it's not as effective. But I especially think for the older kids and for kids that have trouble talking at nighttime, when you're kind of laying in bed or the lights are out or you're not face to face having too much pressure of a conversation, that is a beautiful time to add an additional reward or a nice word to your child. I also think sometimes parents think, kind of one and done, like, the kids have to empty the dishwasher or do a chore or, we kind of reinforce it in the beginning and then we're kind of done with it. Not so much. You think about on your job, even years later, it still feels good for your boss to say, hey, you did a really good job on that project. And
Right.
so I make a point every single time my kids empty the dishwasher, which is a job I absolutely hate, say, hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing that every single time. And so parents can try to remember that it's not, the reinforcement has to keep going to continue with the behavior, but it doesn't have to be so overt. It could be just a nice word. And it could be, a summation of the day later on for the older kids, I think is sometimes really nice.
Yeah, I like that too. So if you could give a parent one piece of advice to learn how to selectively ignore, because it's not easy if you're not used to practicing that, what would it be?
Okay, well, I'm going to give two pieces of advice.
Okay.
The one is to go to the happy place in your brain, because your kids are going to be pushing every single button that usually works. They know what works for you. They know to say I'm hungry or I'm scared or whatever your thing is, your kids know how to activate that and they're very skilled. So it very much helps to breathe, to go to a happy place, think of something in your mind so that you're not focused so much on the kid and the behavior in that moment, because then you're more likely to react. So if you kind of go someplace in your brain, you're still there, you're still listening, but you're not actively engaging mentally, I think it can help you weather through that until the kid calms down a little bit. And then the other thing is to give yourself a break. You're not going to do it perfectly all the time. I wrote this book. I guarantee you, I don't do it perfectly all the time. There are things that I'm engaging in, and then I think, what am I doing? Why am I engaging? Or maybe you have a bad day with your kids and you're in the nighttime thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. This was a terrible day. Well, just say tomorrow I'm going to work harder. Tomorrow I'm going to try it differently, and give yourself a break for not being perfect. And then just wake up the next day and try again.
Yeah,